Folks, we are back. It's good to be back. Dr. James, Dr. Mike, we are here to answer your questions from YouTube. Dr. Mike, how's it going?
Good. I can't wait to answer these questions.
They've been pretty good lately. There was a stretch back on the RP Plus days where we would get like the same questions every time. And there was a few weeks where I was just like, oh my God, if I get one more fucking like mini cut question or a question that the basic question is this: you guys say to do this, but I'm a snowflake. Thoughts? And it was always like, do what we said. still do it.
I know you want to answer drug questions, but here's a drug question.
Drogas.
Speaking of drugs, I got our first guy lined up already.
Oh,
what were you saying?
I was trying to think of what you said, like drug addict guy in Russian was. Narcoman, right?
Narco man. It's like a superhero.
I love that one.
It's great. Narcoman.
Narcoman.
All right, Ryan Davis is actually up.
Got it.
All right. So Ryan Davis asks, hey docs, is there anything to the idea of doing exercise to give a bigger pump first? And following that with an exercise that has a bigger stretch whenever I do tricep pushdowns. Then follow that with overhead tricep extensions. The stretch feels amplified compared to doing just overhead extensions and cause more soreness / disruption, even with volume equated. Thanks for all the great content. So I'll say if it causes more soreness disruption, even with volume equated, it's probably a good thing to do. But mechanistically, you will be weaker in the overhead extension after getting a pump doing other tricep stuff. And thus you won't be able to put as much load in a stretched position overhead as you would otherwise. So just on that mechanics, I'd have to say that I can't do 3 chairs for that whole pump before stretch thing, because it would reduce the amount of load you use to stretch. Another thing is you can only do high loads when you're fresh, but you can always get a big pump even after you're tired. So if you do get a better disruption like that, I think that's great. Keep doing it. I don't predict that everyone will. And for those that don't, I would say you're totally fine doing it the other way around, because mechanistically that aligns potentially even more with what you're doing than otherwise. James?
Yeah, so I would say like just chasing this pattern of like pump and stretch is maybe not necessarily by itself the way to go if the subsequent exercise kind of sucks anyway, right? So if you have like a low SFR exercise as the number 2 and you like, well, I want to get a big stretch and it's that doesn't really hold up. But in this case, if it's like a combination of 2 exercises and their combination increases the SFR of the subsequent one when performed that way, yeah, that seems fine with me. I don't really have anything to say other than that. I would just say like this inherent idea of like pump first, then chase the stretch. I wouldn't just take that at face value. I think we always fall back to the idea of like SFR. Am I getting a good stimulus with this exercise? Don't just pick an exercise for the sake of chasing some exaggerated stretch response.
Yeah. Next up is some guy called Cerberus.
It's a Mass Effect reference. He's got the elusive man little avatar. Cerberus was like the human terrorist organization in that game series. They were like the alt-right group from space, basically.
Oh, trippy. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. How apt that it is on YouTube, the home of the alt-right. So he says, hello, doctors. Here's a question if you're interested in answering. For losing fat while maintaining muscle, aside from the psychological / adherence factor, since we're all hardcore here, is there any difference between a lighter cut over a longer period of time compared to a harsher cut over a shorter period of time? Are there any best practices for losing fat while trying to keep as much muscle as possible regarding the length and depth of the cut? So I actually address this to a huge extent in the Renaissance Diet 2.0 book, talk about the trade-offs. But I will say that within a wide range, anywhere between, I would say, 8 and 14 weeks, you can contract or expand with roughly the same effect. One notable difference stands out to me is how much current strength performance are you interested in having. So if you're a power lifter, for example, and you're a weightlifter, your day-to-day, week-to-week performance matters. You can't just get the strength back later. It's too late. And it'll reduce your training quality during the time that you don't have your strength. with those folks, diets that are much less aggressive are a good idea. And if you insist on losing a lot of weight, it has to be at a very slow pace. If you go fast with those training modalities, you're just going to burn the fuck out. If you're a bodybuilder, it's a little bit different. But generally speaking, the risk to muscle loss exists probably the short, intense diets a little bit more because they tend to dip into your ability to train hard. At that daily deficit, it's just nasty. So that's how I would say there. So largely similar effects. But if you're trying to keep your strength, I would say go slower.
Yeah, and especially for weight class sports, like at that point, you should be keeping like a much tidier range on your competition body weight. So if you find yourself having to lose a lot of weight, that means you're being a sloppy fuck. You got to be better during your non-competition period, so you don't have to do that. I want to kind of go to the point where he said, aside from the psychology adherence factor, since we're all hardcore here, being hardcore has nothing to do with like making choices based on psychology, right? Like you can absolutely pick rates and lengths that best suit your own needs at any given time, which might be a little bit variable. So I don't think that you have to necessarily throw away the psychology and just say, oh, we're all hardcore, so which one's the best? It's like, no, that should factor into a well thought out, a periodized plan saying like, well, I might go a little harder at this time because I have a little bit more life MRV, some more free space to dedicate to training. And other times I might not. Maybe I'm going to stretch it out a little bit longer and go a little bit lighter so it's not as disruptive. All of those things should factor in. So I just don't like framing it as like hardcore psychology doesn't matter. It absolutely does matter. And it's okay to say like, this suits my mental needs as well. And there's no shame in that.
And if you're pushing the rest of your life hard, if you're really hardcore, psychology matters again because we're all finitely able. Yeah. And if you make something easier, it can allow you to push harder on other things.
Absolutely.
All right, next up is the one right down there. It's kusotare.
Spicy.
Says, hey docs, thanks for all the great content over the years. Do you have any tips or strategies for situations where you cannot count calories effectively? I work in a remote camp where all the food is prepared for us, usually just a couple dishes to choose from. It's mostly fine when I'm massing. Just make sure to get enough protein with whey/casein to eat, quote unquote, normally. Now I want to cut, and it's hard to know what the hell I'm eating. I've been trying to regulate just using hunger and a scale for rolling weekly average weight, but the results have oscillated between weight coming off much too quickly and barely at all when I try to compensate for that. Thanks. My only tips are to try to eat a core of protein and to really note how much serving size of stuff you put on your plate. Let's say if you were to do this again during maintenance or massing, note the serving sizes. When you begin cutting, keep the protein servings the same and just take the carb/fat. I'm assuming like mac and cheese or casserole or some shit. Just take the gobs of that and make them 1/3 smaller or half the size. That should put you on a good course. And then you can adjust from there. Yes, the weight will oscillate, but somewhere between weight coming off too quickly and barely at all is an amount of food that'll get you there with oscillations, but on average will result. So that's my best advice, I think.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I've worked with a couple clients who were military personnel who worked in international bases, and they often had to eat in a mess hall. And one of the things that we would do is just exactly as Dr. Mike said, sometimes you just have to look at how much, is on your plate and then just slowly reduce that, eyeballing it the best that you can. One thing that I have had people do is when they have an opportunity, like if they come back stateside or if they get into a bigger city or they can Amazon something, is to just get a food scale and just weigh how much food you're eating at that point, right? So if you have a plate that's full of your kind of normal stuff, kind of get a baseline average of like how much does it kind of weigh and then start using just less overall weight. That's something you can also do, which is a slightly more quantitative version of eyeballing it.
I hope your training is good over there.
A lot of them.
What kind of training you could get in a situation like that?
You mean at a remote camp or at like a military thing?
Both.
I know like a lot of the military folks, they say like, it depends on what you're doing overseas, but like a lot of them who just work on a base, they say like, yeah, you got a lot of free time, so we just work out a lot. And they don't have a ton of stuff, but it'll just be like some barbells and dumbbells kind of stuff. And a lot of them say they get a lot of workout time if they want.
All right. Christina is up next. Christina says, hi, docs. I was wondering why certain body parts tend to get sore more easily than others. Obvious answer would be not hitting any VMAD for that body part, larger muscle groups versus smaller ones, or not incorporating exercise with stretch under load, but this doesn't seem to be the case for me. To make it more concrete, I never experienced any muscle soreness in my back, while my other muscle groups experience muscle soreness on a regular basis. However, I'm making comparable progress in my back lifts as my other lift, and I protract my shoulders when I machine row dumbbell row so that I get the stretch under load. Does this mean my personal back MRV could be higher than the other muscle groups in ratio with already different prescribed volume requirements as laid out in RP's Volume Landmarks articles? Or maybe something with the composition of the muscle fibers itself? I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. Thanks again for all that you do, docs. So it could be all those things. Maybe your MRV is much higher. Maybe your muscle fiber composition in your back on average is slower twitch. What I would say also is that most of the back muscles are anatomically unable to be stretched very far. So like unless you do one arm lat pulls like this, which almost nobody does, you're never stretching your lats very far. It's not surprised they don't get very sore. Your scapular control muscles almost never get stretched an amount that you would consider significant, especially if you look at how short they are to begin with and how not long they become when they get stretched. So already the back, is not like your triceps. Like, especially if you go overhead like this, your triceps will be stretched so far that like as far as they'll go. Your quads, you can feel the maximum stretch with no load if you do a full deep squat. But with the back, it's a little tougher. But being that you're making good gains, I wouldn't change a whole lot. But if you're making good gains and you never get sore, I'd say, try to up your volume a little bit here and there and see if you can get even better gains. Yeah, James?
Yeah, I've had a similar problem traditionally. Like my back just doesn't really get very sore and I still make progress. The only times I will get like sore lats, for example, will be like on a peak week when I train, pretty much at failure or really close to failure. That'll be the only time. Or ironically, if I did like a really heavy set of straight leg deadlifts, then my lats will be sore, ironically.
Yeah.
Right. So in that case, like Mike said, I think just keep doing what you're doing. If your training is going well and you're making good progress, you might consider adding some more isolation movements for any of the specific muscles that you're really trying to hit. Like one thing that I've found is that adding things like lat prayers, as they're called, or like I call them straight arm cable lats.
Yeah.
Is one that you can bang out a lot of volume. You can do different techniques. You can do like metabolite style. You can do myo reps. You can do all sorts of wacky shit with something like that. And that has really made a big progress in my perception of soreness and disruption on my back training, because I also have this problem. So I would consider adding some more isolation stuff. You might find that for like the scapular retractors, you might be doing kind of lame, more shrugging type stuff. But hey, if it gets the job done, then great. And if you're still making good progress overall, I wouldn't change a whole lot. It might just be either adding a little bit more volume than you're used to, or maybe adding some additional isolation exercises in there. That might be all you need to do. Also, just
said that, James.
Sorry. Just one thing I know Mike's really good about talking about this, but just a friendly reminder, like soreness itself is not necessarily the outcome that you want to chase. It's a good little proxy that lets you know that you probably did something well, hopefully not overdid it. So the goal is not to be sore so much as the goal is to either grow, preserve muscle, or make gains in strength. So if you're checking those boxes, then you're largely on the right track. The soreness is more of a proxy kind of thing, not necessarily the outcome.
I'm glad you mentioned the lat prayers, straight arm lat pull downs. They fucking destroy me, bro. I'm so glad I started doing them.
Yeah. I see. So it's funny, like I know we've already talked about this on a previous one, but if you guys watch videos of Dr. Mike doing the lat prayers and then you see a video of me doing it, because of our body size differences, we have very distinct technique differences in how we do it. You might think like, how could it be that different? It's an isolation movement, but you'd be surprised. Like if you have Gumby arms like me and you're a little more stout like Mike, you might have to do it a little bit differently. So Christina, going back to your question, that's another thing to play around with too, where you might find that certain techniques might be better for you than that. Like for me, like for example, like close grip underhand pull downs is one of the only ones that make my lats sore, where other people, like maybe they don't feel it at all. And then playing around with different grips and modifications on your technique sometimes can make a world of difference for back.
Josh is up next. Just Josh. I don't know how the fuck he got that name, but that's pretty
Josh.
sweet. He said, watch Revive Stronger episode with Brad Schoenfeld. He was mentioning partial reps in the stress position having good hypertrophy stimulus. In relation to Team Full ROM, what are your thoughts on if, when, and where it has a place in programming / training?
Do you speak on behalf of Team Full ROM?
I guess. Yeah. So a couple things before I give a decent answer to Josh. Team Full ROM, it's the name. Like, it's kind of tongue in cheek. It's a fun thing to call our little squad there. And we're not married to any training ideology. It's just that most of the people that think they train hard avoid obviously beneficial range of motion, and that makes us happy to feel superior to them. So, yes, one study has showed that stretched position has better hypertrophy stimulus in the full range of motion in leg extensions. And that's very interesting. And it also fits in well with the idea that stretch under load has been hypothesized and demonstrated as a very good hypertrophic stimulus for a long time now. So, thoughts on if, when, and where it has a place in programming and training. So, the if is potentially. The when is anytime you want to experiment with it to see if it gives you a good stimulus to fatigue ratio. And the where is at the gym. At the gym. But yeah, no, it's totally fine to experiment with. The only thing I would say is make sure that when you're experimenting to see if it has a good stimulus to fatigue ratio, try to standardize it as much as possible / track it as well as you can so that you're not doing partials that are arbitrarily distanced and you just have no idea how to replicate the effort, because you could have done partials at a certain range one week and it got a great response. And the next week you accidentally cut the range by a little bit or by a lot and you just don't know because you never tracked. And all of a sudden you get almost no response, but you don't know why, because you're still partials, but how much total physical work did you do? It's easy in a partial to cut it by half, barely notice, and the work has been halved as well, so the stimulus is much less. So I'd say try to track it in some way. Another interesting thing you could do is let's say you're doing an exercise like dips, and you're doing it chest lean forward for a lower chest. What you may be able to do is dip until you're just above the hard part of the dip, not locked out, and then come back down. Dip until you're just above the hard part, come back down. That's a good way to do it. You could do the John Meadows style hack squats or leg presses, where you go all the way down, come back halfway, all the way down, come back all the way, and then repeat that cycle. It essentially jams double the low rate of the lower portion reps as it does full ROM reps into your training. So there's ways to do it. I would just encourage you to do it in such a way that it can be standardized and thus tracked and thus evaluated and assigned logically. Because a lot of guys will do partials and just it's like, how many did you do? They're like, I don't know, bro. Just here to trash it. I don't count shit. So, James, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not fundamentally against the partial reps. It's just that they always devolve into fuckery, right? That's where the problem lies. It's not that the partial reps is inherently the problem. It's that just people just do dumb shit. So I think you can do it in a productive way. My thing always is if you're doing partial reps because you think it's hitting the muscle or a different part, a different muscle group in a unique way, my thing would always be, can I just get this effect by doing another exercise that I haven't really played around with yet? And can I do that in a reproducible way? If the answer is yes, do the latter. If not, and you feel you're really getting something unique out of this partial range of motion that you really haven't found anywhere else or can't think of a way to get it anywhere else, then that's fine. But what drives me nuts is, here's a good example. We're kind of similar to what the example Mike gave. Sometimes I'll see people do high bar style squats. They squat all the way down and then they do partials at the bottom third. Right. And you're kind of what are you doing? They're well, I'm training my glutes. And it's well, you could train your glutes in a much easier way, in a much more direct way than that. And that's, I don't know, that just seems ridiculous. So that would be kind of my take on it. There's probably for everything that a partial does, there's probably a just more standard full range of motion technique, which in my opinion is going to be more reproducible and easier to track. So I would tend to go that direction.
All right. Next up is Talon Woosley.
What the fuck? All right, give me a control F. Yeah.
Talon.
There we go.
Boom. Talon. That's a sweet fucking name. He says, hey, docs, when someone builds their maximally desired muscle mass, let's say their peak natural potential, and want to then maintain it and go on with their life, can they train at slightly higher RIRs, 5, 4, 3, 2, rather than lower RIRs, 3, 2, 1, 0, in a typical 4-week mouse cycle? For example, still maintain their muscle training at MV and MEV. So it's actually MV training that you'll have to do. But if you train 5, 4, 3, 2 RIR, your maintenance volume is just going to be like maybe 1 or 2 sets higher than it would be if you're training harder. That's it.
Yeah, that's literally it. So there's kind of an inverse relationship between the volume landmarks and intensity. So like if you choose a lower intensity, then you just need a little bit more volume. That's really just the trade-off there. The funny thing is, like, if you really want to train, so usually the goal with maintenance volume training is to do less training overall. So in that case, it's actually good to train at, heavier weights and relatively high relatively low RIRs, because then you only have to do like 2 sets and you're done. You can just call it a day. But yeah, either way is fine.
All right. Next up is a gentleman just down from Talon. I'm not reading that shit.
Oh boy.
Krushik.
Oh, that's good.
Maybe. That's just me Russianifying it. All right. Krushik says.
Crazy Sikh.
Crazy Sikh. Krushik means little circle in Russian. I'm sure that's not his name. All right. Hey, doctors, I have a question about long time training effects. To be more precise, it's about joints. At what level of strength should you consider not getting stronger / not using heavy weights if you plan to train your whole life, if not only a few years? It's a good question. My best guess would be if you have workouts frequently in which you're like, oh, fuck, my joints. Because, right, James, like in powerlifting and like,
no, I totally get
like kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, like that shit happens all the time. It's not sustainable. It's dumb. So, but if you have normal weight training workouts where you get a great muscle pump, your joints feel better afterwards, that's where I would stop. So again, say you notice like anything north of 300 pounds on the squat, your knees really start taking a beating. You've tried to go heavier and it's just always the knees. But anything just south of that feels great, then just don't go above 300. Right? It sounds lame, but that's really kind of how it is. It's kind of like we all start lifting with all sorts of expectations, and some of us honor the idea that it's supposed to be good for your body. But like I've done competitive powerlifting. I mean, I was in a position where I remember one time between 2 sets of low bar squats, I had 10 minutes of like ice packs on my elbows because that's how much they fucked up my elbows.
Yes.
And I was like, this is dumb.
This sucks.
So I still did it. So yeah, that would be like, if your joints consistently hurt. James, do you have anything to add to that? Because I don't know.
I mean, that's like the obvious one. It's like when you stop doing it when it's just causing you pain all the time, right? So we talk a little bit about this in the hypertrophy book, but one thing that we do use is kind of as a proxy for some of this is training age. And so one of the things that we recommend is that as your training age starts to increase from intermediate to late to advanced, we actually start to see a shift in the kind of rep ranges that you use, because we find that you really just can't sustain doing 5 to 10 all that time. And then as you move into kind of like the more master's advanced level, we see a little more heavy reliance on that moderate to higher rep range, but then also intensification techniques like pre-fatigue, for example, where instead of having to load up 405 pounds on the squat, you might do some pre-fatigue stuff so you can still get a good robust stimulus without having to use quite as much weight. So there's kind of workarounds around it. But yeah, the obvious answer is the one Dr. Mike gave, where it's just like when it causes you pain and existential dread, that's probably a good time to call it. But just when you start becoming a more advanced trainee, we start leaning on those moderate to higher rep ranges and intensification techniques to lower the absolute load of a lot of the lifts that you have to do.
All right, I'm next. Actually, a gentleman right south of that, Sheik Daddy
or Sheik.
Sorry, Sheik.
I think you were right, Sheik.
All right, he says, could you guys go into more details about training at 40 or after 40, I guess? Actually, the Greek Trojan probably answered this question as well as possible with his first sentence there. The training for your age video explains some of the differences. 40-minute long video, whatever. wanted to know what realistic expectations of muscle growth and fat loss rates are. What mechanisms cause the difference in the extra considerations for recovery and injury prevention? Thanks as always. So it's a very good question, Shake. So I'll tell you what we can't answer. Realistic expectations of muscle growth and fat loss rates. Because that data, first of all, doesn't exist. And second of all, if it existed, it would be a normally distributed about the population of people that do it. So it would have almost no relevance to you as a person. So for example, like James used to train this one lady we lovingly refer to as CrossFit Grandma. And she was a literal grandmother and just didn't really participate in any kind of sports her whole life and looked like a normal person. And then after like 2 years of training CrossFit, had like unreal muscle bellies, separations, and full six-pack in like her 60s. Like, but we are not all CrossFit Grandma. So if you told her, hey, listen, don't bother training, you're just going to get fucked up, she'd have been like, okay, and she'd have done it. She'd be like, she's choking Wolverine with one hand and Hulk with the other. So that's definitely like, so on the other hand, there are people that like, how do I put this nicely? There are people that in their late teens and early 20s gain approximately zero muscle mass despite all their best efforts. Sorry, James, you picked a shitty time to take a drink out of that. James is laughing because he knows it's true. If you read the research literature, actually some of the studies break it down by individual, or they have a scatter plot. And I got 16 weeks of resistance training. This guy gained negative muscle. Like DEXA confirmed he just lost muscle the whole time. It happens, right? So
he was just overreaching the whole time.
Right, I guess that would be the only, like, that would be a good thing for him, because it's like, look, your genetics aren't terrible. You actually just super low volume ultra responder. You just do a set a week and you'll be amazing.
Right. Like, so we did 10 sets. It was like he only needed one set, and so 10 was already like all the way across
9
the curve
past MRV,
diminishing returns and negative
into
returns.
Negative. Yep. So yeah, hopefully that's the case. So I will say though, realistic expectations, as I said in the other big video for the training age, it really depends on, when you start training. So if you started training in your teens, after roughly like age 45, you're just going to lose muscle all the time, slowly, and then in your 70s, not so slowly. So that's point one. Now, if you start in your 30s, you can gain till maybe you're 50. If you start in your 40s, you can gain into your late 50s. If you start in your 50s, you can gain into your 60s. If you start in your 60s, you can gain into your 70s. If you start in your 70s, you can gain into your 80s, right? But the gains relatively will be smaller. Again, we can't put numbers on them because those numbers just simply don't exist. We're making things up. As far as mechanisms, I can think of at least a few. One is your body is not designed to heal wear and tear at a fundamental, complete level. You are designed as a sexually reproducing organism with an average mating span of about 15 years. So your body gives you the good old, you're going to run pretty well until you're about 30. And then it's actually in part designed to, and in part not designed to prevent the dilapidation of structures and mechanisms over time. Like if your genetics were slightly different, you could continue to have essentially a young body for 200 years, no problem. But there's a lot of shit your body just doesn't give a fuck about when it breaks. It just doesn't heal. So for example, every time you tear a muscle, your body connects the two parts of the muscle with scar tissue. Scar tissue is non-functional. It's not designed to be functional. It takes up mass, it takes up weight, and it just connects them. You think like, isn't that like, if I break a shelf, I just like take a piece of cardboard and nail it in and call it good? Like, yeah, that's all your body needs, is for you to run around the Pleistocene for a while, fuck a few more people, raise a few kids to semi-adulthood, and get killed by a mammoth. Like, you don't need to be 100% all the time. And it's
why do you have all
expensive.
this muscle anyway? What are you doing?
What are you doing? You just go get killed. So a lot of it is not really so much a mechanism, but a lack of a mechanism to fix things well. And interesting enough, in the laboratory, they're altering genes in animals now and getting complete healing, but they have to alter genes to do that. So another thing, growth hormone levels fall as you age. That's certainly a factor. So does testosterone, certainly a factor. In women, estrogen, certainly a factor. All those things are anabolic, some of them. in a facilitating role, some of them in a primary drive role. There are muscle fiber conversions as you age. So your faster twitch fibers actually convert to slower twitch fibers, which, as you can figure out, is not really great for hypertrophy. Not bad for endurance, however. And about 100 trillion other mechanisms, all of which just lead to just poor outcomes, right? Here's another one, probably in association with growth hormone. You sleep less the older you get, and less sleep means less recovery. So there's a reason when your kid is 2, he sleeps 18 fucking hours a day and he like doubles his body weight in a year. Like, yeah, you got to sleep like that, deep too. Crazy ass dreams. Yeah, little kids are asleep. Sometimes you can like throw a fucking canister close to their head and they don't even wake up. You're like, what the fuck is going on? Pure, unreal body change, anabolism. You think if I put you on 18 units of growth hormone, you would sleep like that too. You wouldn't live very long, but you would be pretty jacked. So that kind of thing is where a lot of the differences come from. As far as extra considerations for recovery and injury prevention, I'd say I have 2 at least right now that I think I probably said in the video, but I think they really bear repeating if you're still interested. Recovery. Assume you can do a lot less than you think until proven otherwise through very easy scaling. Injury prevention. Don't do anything you think is remotely stupid. So for example, like if you're older and you want to do jiu-jitsu the rest of your life, stop standing up with people. So anytime you stand up, there's a chance you're getting thrown down and shit's going to break. Just start from guard. In the gym, there's always that one rep or that set or that session where you're like, I shouldn't, but fuck it. Don't do anything like that when you're older. When you're younger, there's a good chance you'll get hurt, but you'll be fine. Or not fine. It'll just ruin the rest of your life. But you're young and dumb. Who gives a shit? When you're older, I think James and I have a similar view on this. We're much more disappointed when older clients and people we consult do stupid shit. Because, when you're 18 or 19, whatever, I'm saying YOLO. When you're 51 and you're like, I felt like benching today and I was still sore, but I felt my tweak in my pec. What do you think? Like, what do I think? Well, it doesn't matter what I think. I can tell you for a fact, I do think. And I can't tell you that you think because seemingly you weren't thinking at all. So shit like that is probably the best advice. James, what do you think?
Yeah, really good across the board. So Mike already kind of explained this, but with the aging stuff, this is not a perfect way of thinking about it, but I think it answers kind of a lot of these basic questions. With aging, really what we see after, 40-ish for men, people say like, how much muscle, how much this and that. It's really all we're talking about is like your maximum natural potential starts to go down. So that means if you are somebody who is already flirting with your natural potential, you only got one direction to go. But if you're a beginner or somebody who's taken some significant time off and you're nowhere near that limit, you can absolutely make gains at that time, right? Can you make as much magnitude of gains over the course of your life? Probably not. That ship has kind of sailed. But really the way that you want to think about it is like, just like your maximum natural potential starts to go down over time. So you can still absolutely make progress in a lot of these things. In terms of recovery, injury prevention, so Mike already nailed it. But if you were to take, training plan of you in your 20s and then look at training plan of you now, both of them were well thought and put together, more likely than not, your overall volumes are going to be a little bit lower, and maybe your frequency that you train certain muscle groups per week or do certain activities per week is probably a little bit lower, probably on the scale of maybe one less time per week. Maybe not. You can certainly derive these things the same way, regardless of how old you are. But I am a betting man, and I made 2 of 5 bets on the UFC this weekend. So I made 5 bets. I only actually got 2, but I actually came out making money. How about that?
Hey,
right. So go figure that out.
Where did you lose your money? I'm curious.
Let's see. So I did a throwaway bet on Roxanne Modafferi because she has cashed as an underdog a couple times, and it was her retirement fight. But she was like she was like plus 300 or 400. So it was like a really juicy deal. I bet that Orlovsky would lose. He ended up winning. I forgot the other one, but I won on Adesanya by decision, and I won on Tuivasa. So there we go.
How did you figure to bet on Tuivasa?
Lewis hasn't been looking that great lately. He also has struggled competing in his hometown. Tuivasa was on like a five knockout streak And he was like plus 200. So with the heavyweights, there's so much volatility in that weight class. Like anybody can kind of win. When you see a big lopside in the betting odds, like if you see somebody who's got a plus 200 or more, it's kind of like, why not?
You can make a lot of money.
Yeah, it's like one of those, like, well, one of them's going to get knocked out. So I don't know. We'll see.
Right.
I lost my train of betting. Yeah. So I was saying I'm a betting man, and I would just bet that your frequencies and volumes would be just a little bit lower than when you were at your prime. In terms of other things, definitely pain is your enemy. So if this is kind of what I think what Mike was getting at too, where it's like if whatever you're doing, whatever sport or training you're doing, and you're like, ooh, I'm not feeling it today, or I'm like kind of sore, I'm kind of hurt, or my elbows bother me, just stop. Move on, do something else pain-free. The number one thing that you have to prevent is working through pain. Like when you're a dipshit 20-year-old, you can work through a lot of pain and just shrug it off. When you're over 40, when something hurts, stop doing it. Find something else you can do pain-free, even if it's like a significant deviation away from your training plan. Like if you're like, I'm supposed to hit these leg press numbers today, this is my peak week, but my warm-up sets, my knees are already fucking hurting on this leg press. Fuck it, do something else.
Yeah.
Oh God, I just pulled out like a 2-foot-long dog hair out of my mouth. Jesus. Ugh. It's like,
gross. All right, up next is, can you scroll down a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Right there.
Ibrahim.
Let's take him.
Nice.
All right. He asks, hey guys, I've got the usual question about alcohol, but it's short. It's short, but I find it very interesting. Here's a hypothetical. Person A is at maintenance, training hard and smart. He or she abstains from alcohol consumption. Person B is at a slight surplus, training hard and smart. His or her surplus calories are entirely made up of ethanol. Who's building more muscle? How valuable can the calories from hard liquor be if they generate the surplus of an otherwise healthy and sustainable diet? Well, so I'll take
person A is not gaining any muscle, first of all.
No muscle because you're at maintenance. Congratulations. Person B is at maintenance, but he's also poisoning himself with alcohol. So I'd say person B would lose more muscle than person A.
Yeah, so I'm trying to do some mental math in my head. So you're saying person B is trying to get their weekly calorie surplus from alcohol. So let's just play it like 250 calories per day. Folks, that's a lot of alcohol.
That's a lot of alcohol.
That's a lot. That's normally like when we get the alcohol question, I assume like reasonable drinking habits, and I would say probably not a big deal, but that's a lot. That's like that's a substantial amount of alcohol. Yeah, you're probably losing muscle at that point.
Let me see.
Your life is probably in disarray at that point.
Each beverage defined in the United States, any beverage containing 14 grams of pure alcohol is a standard drink. So let's say we do 150 surplus. That is almost 11 shots of vodka per day.
How many calories are in one shot?
Oh, sorry, I did grams. Good God, I fucked that up.
I was like, wait a minute, that can't be right.
So 250 calories divided by 7 calories per gram. Oh, okay, JK. 2.5 shots for 250 calorie surplus per day. Okay, there is a potential way in which if you had this alcohol, it would delay the burning of your other calories and you would have a net surplus and you would gain weight. So I guess person B probably, although it depends on how hard he was gaining. So here's the thing. I take back my old answer. Person B would gain more. And here's why. His or her surplus calories are entirely made up of ethanol. That actually is, it's phrased accurately in the way of asking the question, but physiologically, that's not how it works. Your surplus can't be made up of any one particular thing. It's like saying, it's like having soup at a certain level in a bowl. and then pouring in more water and saying, see, it's the water that's making it go up. Like, yeah, but it's all mixed together now. So in the context of 2 to 3 shots of vodka per day, but having a surplus, can you gain more muscle than at a maintenance? Yes, I would say the answer is yes.
Yeah, but that would be, we would definitely be seeing diminishing returns as a result of alcohol consumption at that level. Maybe not negative returns, but certainly diminishing returns.
Yeah. There you go, Ibrahim.
The other thing too is that, like if you're thinking about 2.5 shots per day's worth, right? But most people don't drink every day, so then that becomes like 5 shots every other day, right? Or 7.5, done 3 times per week. It gets into some wild territory where the peaks and valleys might actually play a more significant role depending on how that alcohol is actually dosed per week. That's just kind of a funny thought experiment.
All right. Last question for today is Eric Matthews.
Ooh.
Eric Matthews.
Got it.
All right. Let me read this really quick. I have too many fucking tabs open. Oh my. Big Doc Boys. Sorry, I should read this as he wrote it. Big Doc Boys. All caps. All caps is yelling, right?
Yeah.
Do our bodies have a certain weight / size / fat percentage / muscularity they want to sit at? Yes. In other words, when we train or diet with the goal of muscle gain / fat loss from our baseline, is our body resisting that change to some degree? Yes. Increasingly. So as you get farther away from when you started, definitely. My example, before lifting or structuring my diet, I was 135, skinny, no muscle, slight visible ab definition. I assume this is around what I would still be if I never picked up weights, or maybe close to that. Over 4 or 5 years of training, I bulked up to 180. This wasn't all muscle. At my fattest, the ab definition had just gone past being visible, but definitely was much more muscular. So around 20% body fat. I sat at around 80 for around a year. Then in December 2020, over the course of 2 weeks, I lost 15 pounds unexplainably. It's when you go to the doctor. I didn't change my training or diet. I was having sleep apnea problem, but I don't think that's enough for 15 pounds in 2 weeks. I even went to the doctor and had tests run, nothing found. That's very good. Could that just be my body telling me I'm supposed to be a skinny 135-pound rail? And it had enough of being 180, couldn't handle it. I'm sitting around 162 now, still training for muscle gain like I always have. James, take a crack, hit it.
So yeah, I have a hard time with this one because my skeptical side always comes out. So right. So we don't just lose 15 pounds unexplainably, and forgive my skepticism, Eric Matthews, but I think more than likely you did change your diet unless you were meticulously prepping each one of your meals because you were doing, like, for example, a muscle gain diet phase or something like that. If you were just kind of eating as you normally do, the more likely answer is that you were just eating less than you normally do. I don't really, the discussion kind of ends there for me. I don't really know where to go after that. Mike, what do you think?
So, Eric, maybe you were tracking your diet precisely. Maybe you were tracking your activity precisely. If you were not tracking them precisely and cannot nearly guarantee that they didn't change, they are the most likely things that changed so that you lost 15 pounds. Another factor in losing 15 pounds over 2 weeks almost certainly has to involve body water flux. That's pretty large because you're just not going to lose that much tissue in 2 weeks. I mean, Jesus. So let's run the numbers on that. That's 1 pound per day. So you have to be at a 3,500 calorie deficit per day. At your body weight, that would mean you ate nothing and still had a pretty high level of physical activity every day. That did not happen. So my thinking is you may have lost some weight over some months before, but somehow increased your salt intake or something like that, or other health conditions caused you to retain a lot of water. Then over the period of 2 weeks, you drop that retained water. That's my best guess. It's a shot in the dark. It's almost certainly not your body telling you you're supposed to be skinny. because your body will, if you eat normally, go back slowly towards where you're quote unquote supposed to be, or somewhere between that and where you have been for a while. But gee, that takes a long time, and it would reflect itself in your diet. For example, I'm currently weighing 240 to 250 somewhere, 245, let's say. If I, came off all the special sports subs, because they drive my appetite up pretty high, and I just ate whatever I wanted, relatively healthy, of course, I would start to not so slowly drift towards being less than 200 pounds. That being said, I would be eating significantly less because my hunger is so reduced. I'd be eating way, way less, and it would feel totally normal. So that's how that presents itself. When you're being dragged down to your old body weight, it would have to, a physical activity change or an eating change would be the thing that would cause that.
And it would hurt, right? Like you would be suffering.
That's a huge amount of weight to lose.
Like if you've ever done a weight loss diet and you've gotten towards the end of a long series of weight loss, like every last little quarter of a pound is just pain. So that's where I think Mike and I are kind of skeptical. It also could be medication. Like maybe you got put on medication and that caused your body water content to shift a little bit. That's a completely plausible explanation.
Maybe you had like a giant anaconda-sized shit that you forgot about that you took.
Dude,
maybe slap shit where you sleepwalk to the toilet and take a dump.
One of my clients had that happen. The person's weight was elevated for like 2 or 3 days and then was like, mate, I had like a 4 kilogram shit. Or like 4 kilograms worth of shit over like a couple days. He like released the Kraken. He fucking broke the shit seal and then just unloaded for a few days.
So our dog, Gwen, she's an old English bulldog. My wife was out of town. She was actually the sports medicine doctor for Team USA figure skating. She was USA. She yelled out at everyone she saw as I instruct her to. USA. So she was out of the country when he was getting her spaying surgery. So she got her ovaries taken out. Don't worry, I made a joke to the veterinarians when I dropped her off. I was like, I'd like her back just the way, except no ovaries. Yeah, few of them giggled at that. The rest probably thought I was a serial killer. But in any case, get out of here. It was stayed overnight at the animal hospital. I picked her up in the morning. She had the cone of shame and everything, but she seemed very chipper. I've never seen this before. She got major surgery. It's like it didn't affect her like fucking hardly at all. I was, what the fuck? Jumped into the car like normal. Like, holy shit, I'm supposed to be lifting you into things. Don't jump. No perception of pain. Came home and I was like, they feed them at the animal hospital, but they have to do a bit of a cleaning out starvation thing before the surgery. So like the night before, no food, morning, no food. Brought her back home and took her on a little walk. And, she peed, she didn't poop or anything. I was like, okay, brought her back in. It wasn't time to eat yet because I picked her up mid-morning and they say they feed them. So I assumed that she ate in the morning and she's just like, look at me. And everywhere I walk, she walked with me. And I was like, okay, fuck, fine. Do you want some food? I started ruffling the food bag. She's like, she usually has 1 cup of food per meal. I gave her 3.5 total cups of food because she just kept eating it. Finishing and looking at me, I was like, fuck it, more food. She's recovering from surgery here on the side of more. 3.5 cups of food later and like a gallon of water. I was like, what the fuck are these people doing? This dog is fucking starving to death and thirsty as fuck. Instantly wants to go back outside. Takes like 10. She took 3 shits in a row outside. Like poop, walk, poop. And then she slept for like 4 hours. Woke up and did the same thing like 2 more times. She shat like 8 times in a 24-hour period. I was like, holy
my
fuck.
God.
It just kept coming. I was like, damn, dude, she must have been fucking holding it in. Or 3.5 cups of food later. It was impressive.
Poor girl. She had big poo-poos.
Who big poopy lady? That's what we ask her. She never responds to that question.
It's the time of year where the snow is kind of thawing out here. And so all of the like poop is emerging from the snow. So every time I walk outside, I'm like, oh, it's just like a melting poopsicle. It's gross.
Oh,
you get to forget about it for a little while.
Time.
Yeah, it is nasty.
Everything's kind of rotting anyway. All the snow leaves and all the leaves and grass that hadn't like dried up over the winter. It's like, bleh, like mixed together. Do your dogs ever get into the mud, James, on your property?
Oh my God, constantly. We don't even try to keep them clean. Like they love Kamina. He's doing a thing now where he likes to roll in other animals' poop. Yeah. That's his jam. They love the mud, and we have like 3 seasonal streams. And right now it's like the fall, like muck. So it's just like all the snow melt and all the just mud. So when we do little walks around, they go through all the streams and just get covered in mud. They love it. I'll drive the side-by-side around the neighborhood and they'll stick their heads out and it's just fucking mud all over their face. They love it. They stick their faces out and they're like, "Wah!" Yeah. We take them to
How do you wash them?
If they're really dirty, I'll give them a bath in my shower. But we take them to the groomers like once every 4 or 5 weeks. And the groomers also have like Arctic dogs. So they're kind of elitist about it. And they always just kind of give us that look of like, what the fuck are you doing with your dogs when we take them in? Because they're like brown and nasty and they have dreadlocks. I'm like, dude, we live outside of town. They're just like wild Montana dogs at this point.
Do you take out the moving shower head and wash your dogs in the shower?
I just use like a bowl and just kind of wash them.
Oh, okay. Do they deal with water okay, or do they look kind of meek? A lot of dogs, when you wash them, they're just like, they feel like they did something wrong.
They do okay. Kamina looks like a fucking ratty little coyote when he's wet. Right, it's hilarious. He's so skinny. Ham doesn't really give a fuck. She's just like, whatever. Awesome. They're pretty good about the water. They're pretty good. All right. Well, are we finished for this one?
We're done. That's it.
All right. Well, folks, thank you so much for your questions. Dr. Mike, anything you want to pitch? Anything going on?
Nope. More YouTube stuff. I guess you guys are on YouTube listening to this. Got all kinds of videos recorded. Just a heads up again, a lot of times we record videos 3 or 4 months before they're put out. So if you make a request, hey, can you make a video about this? I always jot it down in my handy dandy notebook, but it may be years until we get to it, but lots of great content in the interim. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. I am working on our secret project, which we'll probably announce relatively soon, but for now it remains a secret. That's it for me. Folks, thanks so much for the questions. We appreciate it as always. Make sure you guys subscribe and we will see you next time.